This CACFP meal pattern webinar on serving ounce equivalents for grains was presented on August 26, 2020, and presented to a center-sponsor audience. The version you are currently viewing has been edited and shortened from the original. Hello, everybody. Let's get started. Welcome to the CACFP meal pattern webinar on serving ounce equivalents for grains. My name is Shirley Wu, and I am a child nutrition specialist with the Oregon Department of Education. This series has been funded by a grant from USDA. So we are going to go through a quick poll question today. We have a few different polls just to see if you are following along. So just answer the best you can. Are you currently using ounce equivalents to determine portion sizing for your grains component? And I'm going to go ahead and close out the polls and share. So it looks like a good majority of you are actually using ounce equivalents already. That is terrific. So hopefully today, what we will do is to allay any fears you have about the ounce equivalents. And for those of you who have not started yet, hopefully this will put you on the right path and give you the confidence to start planning for the changeover using ounce equivalents in the grains component. We are going to go over the definition of ounce equivalents, then we will go over our understanding of ounce equivalents, serving sizes, and their use in the grains component. Finally, we will go over in depth 3 different resources that can be used to determine whether your grain items are meeting ounce equivalent serving size requirements. So these are Exhibit A, Team Nutrition's Using Ounce Equivalents for Grains in the CACFP handout, and the Food Buying Guide, Exhibit A's Grains tool. So the first 2 are available for you to download. The third one is a web-based tool, so we'll be taking a look at that. With each of these resources, we'll go over an example and show you how to figure it out if it meets ounce equivalent serving sizes. And of course, at the end, we'll have a few minutes, as always, for questions and answers. So after you finish this webinar, we hope you will learn the definition of ounce equivalents, know whether grain products meet minimum ounce equivalent portion sizes using the available resources out there, and know where to find those resources. So what is an ounce equivalent anyway? The definition of ounce equivalent is a method of measurement for the grains and meat alternate components in the child nutrition programs. You are likely already familiar with ounce equivalents as it's used in the meat alternate components. So you use ounce equivalents because only the lean meats can be counted in child nutrition programs. Ounce equivalents allow you to figure out the portion of the meat that is lean meat only, and whether the portion of meat served will meet minimum portion size requirements. And starting on October 1st, 2021, you will also be required to use ounce equivalents for the grains component in CACFP as well, if you are not already currently doing so already, and it looks like a large portion of you already are. Sponsors who are on the National School Lunch Program have all switched over to ounce equivalents for their grains component already. What does ounce equivalents in the grains component look like? Ounce equivalents will allow you to credit for the amount of grains that is in any given grain product. Many grain products have additional ingredients in them like oil, milk, and eggs that can increase the weight of the final product. Because of that, the amount of grains in a product can vary from item to item. Take a look at the bread roll that we have on the screen and compare it to the waffle that's in the middle of the screen. While the bread roll might be smaller and weigh less than the waffle, the amount of creditable grain flour in the products might be the same because the bread roll is mostly grains, while the waffles include other ingredients. In addition, grain products may vary in size. Waffles come in many different sizes, and with some crediting for far larger portions than the minimum. So the takeaway is that using ounce equivalents will help you figure out whether your portion sizes are meeting minimum serving size requirements. So let's take a look even more closely at our bread and waffle examples. Here we have product ingredient lists, and you can see that the bread contains mostly whole wheat flour, water, salt, instant yeast, and vegetable oil. All of the ingredients except for the water and flour are probably in very minute amounts. In contrast, the waffle includes enriched flour, water, vegetable oil, eggs, baking soda, sugar, and salt. This is not only more ingredients than the bread roll, but the proportion of non-flour ingredients is probably higher compared to the bread roll. When you take into account all these other ingredients, you can see how both items may have the same amount of creditable flour, but the addition of all of these other ingredients result in a heavier weight for the waffles. So now that you know that, the reason why we use ounce equivalents is because it allows us to be more precise with our measurements. And also, since it's already in use for the National School Lunch Program and in the dietary guidelines for Americans, it helps our sponsors to have one standard across different programs. And for those of you who aren't familiar with ounce equivalents, don't worry, it's simply another way to measure grains. And in practice, there won't be too many changes at all. So with that in mind, let's compare ounce equivalents to our current minimum serving sizes that we use in CACFP. With ounce equivalents, we will be simply shifting the language from slice or serving to ounce equivalent. 1 slice or serving is equal to 1 ounce equivalent. Let's say you had a child named Adam who is 4 years old, and under the current minimum serving sizes, Adam's minimum serving size will be half a slice for any meal or snack. Under ounce equivalents, though, a minimum serving size will be half ounce equivalent. So instead of serving half a slice or half a serving, you are now serving Adam half an ounce equivalent for his grains component. Not much changes there. And when you look across all of the different age group, you can see again, it's just a simple language shift from serving size to ounce equivalent. Children ages 1 to 2 and 3 to 5 all will receive at least half ounce equivalent of grains for all meals and snacks. Children ages 6 through 12 and 13 through 18 will receive at least 1 ounce equivalent of grains for all meals and snacks, and adults will receive 2 ounce equivalents for all meals and 1 ounce equivalent for all snacks. What does 1 ounce equivalent portions look like? Here's 6 different examples. 1 ounce equivalent looks like 20 cheese crackers, 12 thin wheat crackers, 5 woven whole wheat crackers, or 1 small slice of toast, or 1 croissant, or half a cup of cooked rice. If you're thinking that this looks really similar to your current minimum serving sizes for grains, it probably is. If you compare the ounce equivalent minimum serving sizes to the serving sizes in use for CACFP right now, there probably is very little practical difference. So let's take a look at Exhibit A, where we're going to explore this a little further. You might be familiar with Exhibit A already for grain-based desserts. When we look at those red colors, we know that those are the items that are grain-based desserts. But this is actually a great multitasking tool. The original purpose for Exhibit A was to help child nutrition sponsors and providers figure out serving sizes for different types of grains. And with the switch over to ounce equivalents, Exhibit A is now even more handy because it shows you both ounce equivalent minimum serving sizes and the current minimum serving size for CACFP so you can compare the differences. So looking at this first page of Exhibit A, if you take a look at the middle column, which is now highlighted here in the blue box, you will see a series of numbers with ounce equivalents equaling another number in grams or ounces. This is the conversion factor. Essentially, for all products that is in Group A, which is conveniently blocked by our new smart art right now, 1 ounce equivalent serving size is equal to 22 grams or 0.8 grams in weight for the product. If you look at all of the ingredients in Group A, and you can probably download that on under your handouts tab and take a look at it there, you can see that they are all very similar products with similar ingredients. So there's not too much water added in there, and there's not too much other non-grain ingredients added. Similarly, if you look down below at Group B, and look at the ounce equivalent column, you'll see that all of the items from Group B can have 1 ounce equivalent serving size for every 28 grams weight or 1 ounce of weight. What's interesting is that if you compare this column to the minimum serving size column on the right-hand most side, that's the one that's highlighted in red right now, you will notice that 1 ounce equivalent and 1 serving only has a very slight difference in gram weight. For Group A, 1 ounce equivalent is equal to 22 grams. If you look under the minimum serving size, that's the section in red, 1 serving is equal to 20 grams before. So 22 grams versus 20 grams. That's a difference, if you guys can do the math along with me, of 2 grams only. In fact, if you go through all 3 pages of Exhibit A and you compare those 2 columns, you'll notice that ounce equivalents and our current minimum serving sizes only vary between 2 to 10 grams at the most. That's not a lot of difference. And if you are not familiar with how heavy a gram is, here's a few common examples that you probably have lying around on your desk right now. 2 paper clips would equal 2 grams, so that's the difference in Group A. A credit card weighs about 5 grams, so I'm not counting all of those very heavy credit cards those power users out there have, but just the regular credit cards. A USB drive would weigh between 7 to 9 grams, so you can see that these are not very big differences in weight. As you're preparing yourself to move over to ounce equivalents, understand that this shift represents a very small practical difference to your day-to-day service. 2 to 10 grams is a very small difference, very, very small. And I would bet there's actually probably kids out there who drops more than 2 to 10 grams in crumbs alone every single meal in snack time. Not a lot of difference. So when we look at Exhibit A, you might think, well, why does ounce equivalence matter at all? And it matters because ounce equivalents will be our new standard measurement. And as sponsors, you do need to understand what standard you are expected to follow. And this is why Exhibit A is such an important tool for anyone that needs to understand whether they are meeting minimum serving sizes for their grains component or not. While Exhibit A does not contain all the grain items that are available out there in the marketplace, they do cover a large swath of common grain products that are served today. And there are 9 different groups in Exhibit A. While we don't have time to go through all of the different groups today, I do want to point out that one group, Group I, does represent a bigger difference than most for the change over to ounce equivalent. And so I'm highlighting it under page 3. And this group only contains ready-to-eat breakfast cereals. And so you can see where it's all located here. And then breakfast cereals have probably the largest difference compared to the previous minimum serving size. If you can see that middle column right there, you can see that that has the ounce equivalents broken up into 3 distinct groups for cereals. One is for flakes and rounds, one is for puffed cereal, and one is for granola. The reason why they are broken up into 3 different groups is because cereal is often hard to measure by weight. Instead, it is often served using volume. However, because cereals have so many different shapes and densities, using one volume measurement might result in having too much variations in creditable grains. So we broke it out into 3 different groups. And if you're confused about which cereals go into which groups, just know that in general, flakes and rounds include cereals like Corn Flakes and Cheerios. The Cheerios would fall under the rounds category because we're thinking about rounds as these donut-shaped cereals. Puffed cereals would include cereals like Kix and Chex. Sometimes people think that Kix is a round because, well, it is a very round shape. But remember that the rounds are more for the donut-shaped cereals like Cheerios. Instead, because Kix does have a lot of air in it, it's considered a puff. So puffs have a lot more air inside. Granolas are pretty self-explanatory. Most of us know what granolas are. So now that you know what type of information is on Exhibit A, how do we use it to figure out if we are meeting our ounce equivalent portion size requirement? We're going to take another example. This time we have Kyle, who is 8 years old, and you would like to serve him a sandwich for his after-school supper. How can you use Exhibit A to figure out if his meal meets ounce equivalent portion size requirements? So the first thing you're going to do is to find the grain item on your Exhibit A list. In this case, bread is going to be on Group B of Exhibit A. So you can see here on Exhibit A, we have Group B, and you can see breads listed right there. Once you find a group, you will take a look at the ounce equivalent column for it. Here it is in the middle column. And then next, you're going to look at the gram or ounce weight for 1 or 1/2 ounce equivalent. So this depends on the age group that you're serving. And with Kyle, this is going to be the 1 ounce equivalent because he's 8 years old. So there we have it, 1 ounce equivalent. And that equals 28 grams. And one thing to note that if you are serving adults, it doesn't list the 2-ounce portion sizes. So what you'll do is you'll just take the 1 ounce and multiply it by 2. Pretty easy. So now that you know your required minimum serving size for your grain item, you will want to compare it to the serving size listed on the nutrition facts label. This will be step 4. Looking at your nutrition facts label, look for the serving size at the top of the label. It will always have a weight in grams or ounces, and in our example, it lists 1 slice as 32 grams. When you are reviewing the nutrition facts label, though, you will want to consider the portion size that you're serving your participants. This will be step 5. If you're serving Kyle a full-size sandwich, it usually contains 2 slices of bread. If you're serving 2 slices of bread, you want to make sure that you're taking the serving size on the label and multiplying it by 2. 32 grams times 2 equals 64 grams total. The total weight of the item served will be 64 grams. So now that you have all of this information, you're going to want to evaluate the portions that's going to be served as your last step. So 64 grams is what you're serving, and the minimum serving size for ounce equivalents is equal to 28 grams. Did this meet your minimum serving size? So I'm sure you can all guess, yes, it does. 64 grams is far greater than 28 grams, so it exceeds the minimum serving size requirements under ounce equivalents. You will notice as you review your grain products that most of the grain products and portions you serve will exceed the minimum serving size. CACFP does not have a ceiling on the portion sizes served. Just be judicious in what you're serving and look at what your kids can eat. You don't want to be wasteful either. Just know that you must meet the minimum portion size requirements, but other than that, it's up to you for you to decide. Okay, so now that we kind of have a good idea of what you can see on Exhibit A and what you can use to determine whether your grain items are meeting minimum ounce equivalent serving sizes or not, let's take a look at another question. So I'm going to go ahead and launch the next poll. You are serving Kix to a group of 4-year-olds. What is the minimum portion size for each child? Is it 0.25 cups, 0.5 cups, 0.625 cups, or 0.85 cups? There are a few different steps you need to figure out. So again, take a look at Exhibit A if you haven't already. take a look at the group that contains breakfast cereals on Exhibit A. And you'll also want to know the minimum serving size for 4-year-olds under ounce equivalents. And we will go over the answers. So I'm going to go ahead and close the poll, and we'll see what the majority answered. So it looks like the majority of you answered 0.625. Let's take a look and see if that was correct. Like I said before, there are a few different pieces of information you need to know, and the answer is 0.625. So good job to the majority of you. What is the minimum serving size for a 4-year-old? It's 1/2 ounce equivalent for all meals and snacks. Next, what we need to know is what kind of cereal is Kix? Is it a round? Is it a puff? Is it a granola? And even though we know Kix is round shape, it is considered a puffed cereal. Remember, Kix has a lot of air inside. The next step to look at is Exhibit A, which I'm going to pull up here. And you can find ready-to-eat breakfast cereals under Group I. And you can find puffed cereals right there. And it's 1.25 cups for 1 ounces. And we know that we only need 1/2 ounce equivalent though, so we need to do a little bit of math. 1.25 divided by 2 equals 0.625. So this is our answer. 0.625. That's a really awkward measurement though. So since there's really not any easy measuring cups you can use if you're scooping out the cereal, what you might want to do instead is to use a 2/3 cup measurement, which is the closest standard measurement. That'll go for 0.667 cups. Or if you don't have a 2/3 cup measurement, you can always use a 3/4 cup measurement instead. Remember that if you are using approximate measurements, you always want to round up, never down, so you can make sure that you are meeting a full minimum serving. So what if all of that seemed like way too much work for you and you want to do something a little bit easier? Well, you are in luck because we have a handout from USDA's Team Nutrition titled Using Ounce Equivalents for Grains in the Child and Adult Care Food Program. And this 6-page handout provides practical serving sizes for common grain items based on all age groups. There's no calculations required. Whew. And the handout contains links to helpful tools for grain items that you don't find listed on this handout. We highly recommend that you use this chart. If you're familiar with the ODE Easy to Use Grains chart from before, it's pretty much the same format. Let's take a look at their grains measuring chart so you can see how it works. If you want to follow along, and I know some of you might have smaller screens so you can't read all of the small print on this webinar, I would highly recommend that you download this handout from the Handouts tab right now so you can follow along with us. And if you click on the link that's on your slide, this is the title that's above, that's underlined in blue. You can go directly to Team Nutrition's webpage to download the file. They also have a Spanish version, and you can order print copies as well. Here is what the grains measuring chart looks like. It goes from pages 2 to 4 of the handout, and it lists all of the most common Exhibit A items and the appropriate serving sizes for the age group served. So let's take a look at an example and see how it works. You have Addison, who is 5 years old, and you want to serve her oatmeal. Using the grains measuring chart, what would be the minimum portion size that must be served? And you can see the measuring chart on the screen, and I know it's pretty small, so it's hard to read, but at the very bottom, you can see oatmeal listed right there. And let's make this a little bit bigger. There we go. Looking at the chart, the second column from the left lists the minimum serving sizes for ages 1 to 5. So Addison's 5 years old, so she would fall into this category. And for this age group, you can see on there that the minimum serving size for oatmeal is 1/4 cup cooked or 14 grams dry. So that would be your answer. You would serve her at least 1/4 cup of cooked oatmeal. Pretty easy, right? No calculations, just the answer right there on the handout right there for you. I do want to point out that cereal is listed on the grains measuring chart as well. And you might notice that it states puffed cereals, like those Kix that we talked about earlier, requires 3/4 cups or 14 grams instead of that really awkward 0.625 cups like we had as an answer. And this is because USDA knows that most people won't be using 0.625 cups, and so they round it up in increments of 1/4 cup. Remember, never round down. If you round down to 1/2 cup, then your grains will not meet minimum serving size requirements. Now that you know how to use this handout, I'm going to have you try out one example by yourself. I'm not going to launch the poll just yet because I want you to have a chance to review the chart on the screen. So our question is, based on this chart that you see, what is the minimum number of saltine crackers that must be served to an adult participant at snack time? Is it 4 crackers, 8 crackers, 14 crackers, or 16 crackers? I'm going to go ahead and launch the poll. I'm going to go ahead and close that poll. Thanks, you guys. So it looks like the 8 crackers kind of eked out a little bit of a win. So let's see what the answer was. So I'm going to go ahead and hide this, and we're going to go to our next slide. The answer is 8 crackers. It looks like those of you who got the majority of the answers did get the right answer. So good job. Why is it 8 crackers though? I know 16 crackers was a very popular answer as well. So remember that adults at snack time only require 1 ounce equivalent for their minimum serving size. We are actually going to be looking at the middle column instead of the rightmost column. And you can see that adults at snack only are listed under that age group. Then you can scroll down to saltine crackers about 3 rows down, and you see 8 crackers. It's all about looking at the right place for the right answers. I know sometimes that can be tricky, especially with adult portion sizes. But in general, this handout is very useful if you're using a common grain item. What if, though, the item you're wanting to use is not on this list, but is an Exhibit A item? You don't want to do any calculations for yourself. In that case, you are going to have to use the Exhibit A's grain tool. If the grain item you are wanting to portion out is not on that using ounce equivalent handout, you're going to go to the food buying guide, take a look at the Exhibit A's grains tool, and it's listed here in the middle of the page. If you go on to that foodbuyingguide.fns.usda.gov, if you're using the mobile app, it's available there under More on the bottom row. We're going to take a quick look at an example. What you'll do is once you click into that Exhibit A's grains tool, it'll ask you if you want to start a new item. And it'll look like the image on the bottom that says Exhibit A grain tool, edit product. And all you have to do is enter in your product name, type in the keyword for the grain item, for example, pie crust, if you wanted to search for chicken pot pie. And the name will pop up at the bottom here. And then what you're going to do is enter in the serving size from your nutrition label. And we have the nutrition label for our pie crust up top. And you can see that serving size 1/12 of a crust is 21 grams. You'll enter in the measurement unit, which is in grams for this one. And you'll enter in 21 there. And what it'll give you is the grains contribution of 0.5 ounce equivalents of grains. If you were serving children ages 1 through 5, 0.5 ounces would be perfect. But based on the tool, if you were serving ages 6 to 18 years old, then you would need to double the suggested portions. And if you were serving adults during a mealtime, you would need to quadruple the suggested portions. This tool does have some limitations. It does only include grains that are listed in Exhibit A. So there's only about a handful of items that are listed on here that's not on the handout. But just know that if you ever get stuck on crediting a grain item, you can always reach out to your assigned child nutrition specialist, and they can help you figure out how to credit these items. We don't have time today to go over different processed combination foods, but know that anytime you have a processed combination food, they will either need a product formulation statement or a child nutrition label in order to be creditable. The product formulation statement or child nutrition label will also conveniently include the portion sizes. And most of the time, those portion sizes will already be in ounce equivalents. But if not, you may need to convert it yourself based on the weight that is provided per serving. For all single component grain products, though, you do not need to collect any additional supporting documentation beyond what is required for your sugar limit thresholds. These are your breakfast cereals or your whole grain rich items. You don't need any additional supporting documentation for these single component grain products. And if you do need help organizing your grain items, we do have a handy product specification sheet. This can be downloaded as well under your handouts tab. This isn't a required form, but if you have a lot of different grain items and you want a form that can help you organize both creditability status and serving size requirements, you can use this. Remember that serving a portion size that is larger than the minimum serving is allowed, and there's also a notes section at the bottom for any additional information you want to add. To put it all together, as you're preparing for the move over to ounce equivalents, there's a few steps you should take. So first, review what grain products you are currently serving. It's always a good idea to review your menus at least once a year, see what's working, see what's not. For example, you might want to check creditability. Next, figure out how much your participants are receiving. What are the portion sizes for each of your grain items that are being served? Once you have those information, you will want to know if this meets minimum ounce equivalent serving sizes for each of the age groups that you serve. So it'll be half an ounce equivalent for children 1 to 5, 1 ounce equivalent for children 6 to 18, 2 ounce equivalent at meals, and 1 ounce equivalent at snacks for adults. So compare your portions to the grains measuring chart on our Using Ounce Equivalents for Grains handout. And if your item is not on the handout, you can either use the Exhibit A's grains tool on the food buying guide, or you can reach out to your specialist if the item is not on either of those tools. Finally, if your portion served meets or exceeds the minimum serving sizes for the age groups and meal or snack type, then your item will be all set for ounce equivalents. Again, don't be surprised if most of your items far exceed minimum serving sizes. Most of the time, what we get as portion sizes for grains are far above our minimum serving sizes. So we talked through all the available resources out there. Let's answer one last poll. What resources can be used to figure out minimum ounce equivalent serving sizes for your grain item? Check all that applies. Is it Exhibit A, using the ounce equivalent for grains in the CACFP handout, Exhibit A grain tools in the food buying guide, or your friendly child nutrition specialist? So it looks like most people agreed with all of the answers or all of the above. And that's right. So it is all of the above. And for those of you who didn't check on your friendly child nutrition specialist, I'm sure that we would all be very happy to answer any of your questions if you can't find it in any of the other 3 tools. If you do have questions, again, reach out to us. We do want to make sure that you are comfortable with ounce equivalents as we start this transition, but do use those 3 different tools that we went over today. Using the ounce equivalents for grains handout, that one is especially helpful. All right. Let's do a quick summary of what we learned about ounce equivalents today. So we know it will become effective October 1st, 2021 for the CACFP. We also know that ounce equivalents is a method of crediting serving sizes for the grains component that is going to replace our current method of determining serving sizes. In practicality, really not that much difference. And the reason why we are moving to ounce equivalents is because it will be a more consistent system of measurement that will align CACFP with the National School Lunch Program and also the current dietary guidelines for Americans. So in effect, what used to be 1 servings of grains will now be 1 ounce equivalent, and that the actual difference in grams between 1 serving and 1 ounce equivalent is very, very small. There's several different resources that's available to help you out, and these include the Exhibit A, Team Nutrition's Ounce Equivalent handout, and the Food Buying Guide Exhibit A Grains tool, as well as product specification sheet if you choose to use it, and your friendly specialist. Know that we are not requiring any additional documentation for ounce equivalents beyond what you already need to have for your combination foods or your whole grain rich items or for your breakfast cereals. So I'm going to take a minute to look at the questions that were sent in through the chat box during our session. One question that I do get a lot is, what if I'm already doing ounce equivalents as a school district? Is there anything else different that I need to do for CACFP? And the answer is no, just keep doing what you're doing. The ounce equivalent requirements for the National School Lunch Program will be the same for CACFP. And we have another question about crediting home-baked items, for example, muffins. This is actually a little complicated as a question, so let me pause my screen here. What you're going to do actually, it does require a little bit more calculation on your part, but when it comes to flours, and I assume that's what you're asking when you're talking about baking from scratch, you're going to go to the appendix section. So this is after you log into the food buying guide, and you're going to go into the section on grains. This is Appendix E, and I'm going to go ahead and increase the size of my screen so you guys can see this a little better. And I believe it is under Worksheet for calculating grains and bread contributions for the type of food products in groups A through G. So that's quite a mouthful, but under here, there's a conversion chart. And you can see this in the green and the orange or peach. And so depending on what ingredients you're using, so for example, if you're using whole wheat flour, the conversion would be 1 cup of whole wheat flour is equal to 120 grams. You'll have to do a little bit of conversion there. So let's say you're using 2 cups of flour for your recipe. So 2 cups times 120 grams, that would be 240 grams. And then you would divide that by the number of portions that you get. Hopefully that makes sense. If you have more questions about this, feel free to reach out to your assigned specialist and we can talk a little bit more about that. But great question. And see if we have any other questions out there. Can we switch to ounce equivalents now, or do we need to wait until October 2021? You can go ahead and start ounce equivalents right now. All right, so it looks like that's all the questions that I got today. I do want to say thank you all for taking part, and ODE is committed to equity and excellence for every learner. And we do want to make sure that our communities are supported in their goal to reach equitable implementation of policy, practices, procedures, and legislation. And if you want to look at more resources, we do have more on our ODE CMP YouTube channel. And this institution is an equal opportunity provider.